when you took that pivot to boat, what really made you, take that switch and jump on boat to boat? How was the initial conversations with the founders of Boat like?
And of course, Meghna, you'd be very happy that Aman Gupta, one of the co-founders, is an ISB, graduate, and he attributes a lot of his initial success to some of the great learnings that he had at ISB. I think this desire for curiosity, this desire for learning, and the question I asked myself was, as a result of this opportunity, will I grow?
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Leaders Unplugged. I'm Meghna, and today we have a very special guest joining us. He's a pioneer in India's consumer sector and has worked with some of the most successful startups in India. Joining us today is Mr. Vivek Gambhir, an industry leader with over 30 years of experience spanning FMCG, consumer tech, investing and consulting. Hello Vivek, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us here. It's an absolute pleasure to host you, and welcome to ISB.
Thank you, Meghna. It's a pleasure being here.
Talking about your career, right? Let's dive right in. You've had such an impressive journey. After your MBA at Harvard, you went on to Bain, where you played a key role in establishing Bain's presence in India. So talking about your career, right, I heard this interesting story about how when you were leaving Godrej and you had this call from Bain, you were about to go back to Bain, you had your laptop in hand, and that's when the call from Boat came up. So, looking at these interesting pivots in your career, was consulting always part of the plan, or did you just take up those curveballs as they came along the way?
If someone were to ask me, Meghna, when I was at Harvard, whether I would go in and do consulting at Bain or be part of the Godrej Group or be a CEO in a startup at Boat and now a venture partner at Lightspeed, I think I would have laughed, right? There wasn't really a particular playbook as such. And honestly, it was more about figure it out as you go along journey. But a lot of it actually came to spotting the right opportunities, being very open to trying different things, a little bit of luck, and honestly, just having some amazing people who took bets on me at the right time. So as I look back, I think one common theme was this desire for curiosity, this desire for learning, and the question I asked myself was, as a result of this opportunity, will I grow? And will I be able to make a big difference? And as long as those questions were answered, through all of these opportunities, I feel very privileged and blessed to have been able to work with a lot of people to be able to hopefully make a small difference.
So, when you took that pivot to Boat, what really made you, take that switch and jump on boat to Boat? How was the initial conversations with the founders of Boat like?
And of course, Meghna, you'd be very happy that Aman Gupta, one of the co-founders, is an ISB, graduate, and he attributes a lot of his initial success to some of the great learnings that he had at ISB. When I joined Boat, I spent about almost 3 months with the founders. I got to know them very well, and one thing led to another. They were growing very fast. They had brought in a global investor on board, and as they told me, they really wanted to find a way to add muscle to the hustle with a little bit of adult supervision, as they called it. I was extremely energized by what they were trying to build. And what they were looking for was a lot of support to be able to now scale the company up. The brand was amazing, but there was a lot of work required to put the right systems, the right processes, and the right governance in place, along with trying to drive a much more coherent strategy about what customers to focus on, how to think about various channels. So I felt like, again, this was an opportunity to work with two incredibly inspiring founders and try and find a way to support them to scale up. And the result of it was actually a wonderful partnership which truly allowed us to almost, over a couple of years, almost grow the company by 3 times.
So, talking about how you have been part of the journey of both scaling up, that brings me to another common theme across your career journey. So, you have mostly thrived in a competitive and challenging environment, whether it was at Bain, where when Bain came into India, McKinsey and BCG were already here, and or at Godrej, they were competing with giants like L'Oreal and HUL. And in the case of both, so many D2C electronics brands came in after investor interest in the space shot up. So, in this case, what were the principles that you relied on to ensure that the brand thrives in such a competitive environment?
Cultivating a challenger mindset is something which I get very energized by. And I love working with challenger brands who are out there to really disrupt the status quo. And what's interesting typically is that people think about challengers as underdogs, and they really talk about challenges in terms of the David versus Goliath story. But to me, I think challenges can come in all shapes and sizes. Small companies can be challengers, even large companies can be challengers. What challenges are all about is a mindset. It's a mindset about disrupting the status quo, having the conviction and boldness and the belief that you can do something truly different to be able to serve customers and consumers in very different manners.
So most D2C brands today, actually, like you said, are coming in as challenger brands, right? And despite the perils and risk of that, many young people today are aspiring to be founders. In fact, entrepreneurship is a future choice, is much celebrated. But I do feel that a dilemma that most young people face is whether to take the plunge right straight, go ahead when they spot the opportunity, or maybe take it slow, get some experience in business and then shift. So what's your advice for young people?
The ride to being an entrepreneur can be extremely wild and extremely exciting. But the reality is that we tend to over-glamorize entrepreneurialism. But what people sometimes forget is that it's a fairly lonely journey. One really has to be prepared for the grind. And one has to be fully all in. And so what I always tell young professionals is that if you truly believe that you are trying to solve a problem which no one has solved before, and if solving that problem is keeping you awake 24/7 and you can't even get to sleep, then by all means, take the plunge. And if you can find someone else to do it with, the journey gets a little bit less lonely. But do it for the right reasons. I see a lot of people who like the idea of being entrepreneurs, but aren't fully committed to it. And if you are not fully committed to it, it can be a very, very difficult and a painful journey.
I think many of us as young people are waiting for that light bulb moment to get a really strong, passionate idea that we can dive all in and start working on. So as we talk about entrepreneurship, right, many founders face this challenge today of balancing short-term operational efficiency and profitability with growth creation for the long term as they meet investor expectations. There's also this need to balance low cost with being a differentiator brand, right? That too, as consumers are becoming more choosy and about aligning with the brand purpose. So how do you guide founders on striking this tricky balance? What are your thoughts on this?
It's probably one of the most difficult tightropes for any founder to be able to find the right balance between driving revenue growth and profitability. The honest answer is that both are very important, but the relative importance of these does change depending on the stage that the company is on. So in the beginning, what's extremely important if you have enough cash in the bank is to be able to acquire customers. At that stage, what's important is to get the unit economics right and to be able to grow probably 4 to 5x the category growth rates. And being able to show that you are being able to acquire and retain customers. So while top line is important, I think the measures of profitability are equally important, but they keep on changing at various stages of growth of the company. The other practical reality is that you also have to think about how much runway do you have? how much fuel in the tank you have. So if you have enough runway for say 2 or 3 years, you have to lean in, and you can lean in more towards growth. But if you don't have enough cash in the bank, you have to ruthlessly prioritize on efficiencies and be as frugal as possible.
So, India's growth story for a long time has been driven by consumption, right? And there are so many startups coming up, even in rural areas, to serve that demand from such areas. So, as a venture investor, to spot such startups at an early stage, you need a forward looking mindset to spot those potential disruptors that can change the market. So, how do you think long term as an investor and identify these segments in the market before they reach scale?
I think there are three ways to think about this. The first lens, which is very important, is to actually have a point of view in terms of how the world is actually going to change. What is very important for investors is to be able to look in the future based on, again, data, logic, and analysis, and a certain amount of conviction about what the worldview is in terms of what the world could be in the future. I call it the theme-based approach. A big theme today is artificial intelligence. And so for a lot of investors, they need to have a point of view on what the various scenarios might be in which AI could actually play a very significant role. You may not have the right answer, but it's very important to develop certain emergent thinking of what the world might look like 5 or 10 years down the road. The second important part of investing is then to find extremely bold and courageous founders, and also the abilities to really disrupt the status quo. So a lot of what we end up doing again is partnering with extraordinary founders and being able to really provide them the support that they need to be able to redefine what the future could look like. But then the third part ought to be is this ability or the conviction to be able to drive outsized returns. Because at the end of the day, this is the world of investing. And so you have to marry themes, founders, and the ability to drive outsized returns. As you're doing this, I think what I've learned through Lightspeed is that depth has to be the center of gravity. I find many times investors just scratching the surface, and they tend to be very opportunistic or superficial. I think there is a depth of commitment required, and there has to be a depth in belief, which is about having the right conviction and knowing that there are going to be the inevitable peaks and valleys, and being able to navigate these founders through the hardest times as well.
That's wonderful. I think the third point you said about having depth, that is relevant for so many young people today to deeply understand whichever sector or whatever work they're doing or what they're passionate about. So a lot of our listeners here today are young professionals. So I want to strive this discussion in that direction so they can take on some actionable advice from here. So Vivek, you recently co-authored a book called Head Start, where you talked about the importance of building a personal brand. So what is your advice for young people just early on in their careers on building their personal brand? More importantly, on building an authentic and genuine personal brand.
Tom Peters wrote this landmark paper called The Brand Called You many years ago. And I remember, I think it was Jeff Bezos who once said that, your brand is what, when you're not in the room, the way people talk about you is what your brand is. So ultimately, whether you're looking for a job, whether you want a promotion, or whether you're on the dating circuit, at the end of the day, you need to find a way to be able to differentiate yourself and be very clear in terms of what you stand for, what makes you unique and special. And that's the heart of personal branding. It's actually about building relationships. It's about building meaningful connections and also communicating to people who you are and what you stand for.
So you also mentioned about having a strong network and relationships, right? And many folks go to a B school to build that network funnel. Now you went for your MBA at Harvard, and after that you came back to India where you worked across segments with different organizations. So, in today's scenario, if you had to advise someone, what is your perspective on pursuing an MBA in India versus doing one abroad?
Look, there are certainly lots of intrinsic advantages a business school like Harvard would have built over many, many decades of experience, and the global network that one gets at Harvard is probably unmatched. Having said that, it's incredibly wonderful to see how schools like ISB have been rapidly catching up in a very short amount of time. And in many ways, the quality of education in ISB is almost at par with some of the best schools in the world. Also, most of the action is happening in emerging markets like India. It's a very personal choice one has to make. But certainly, if I look at the quality of students from ISB, I work with so many of them. We truly have a world-class institution like ISB here in India. And I'm not just saying this because I'm at ISB today. I truly believe that the quality of education that ISB is offering is comparable to the best in the world.
I must say that feels quite nice to hear. And India is the place to be, right? We have seen so many investors who have India as their top pick for an emerging market investment. So Vivek, I want to ask you about your investment philosophy and thoughts. So let's say you had 50 crores in hand today. Where would you want to invest that? Or which segments do you think are really poised for a breakthrough in the market?
I think the opportunities are across so many different sectors. There are so many themes that are playing out. Obviously, the big theme right now is AI, and there's a huge amount of investments happening in the world of AI. But beyond AI, I think a couple of sectors which I feel passionate about. One is the entire piece around climate change, and particularly decarbonization. And I think if there are any great investments in decarbonizing outcomes, definitely it's an area which I'd be very interested in. The second part, as you were talking about in the world of AI, while we're focusing so much on technology, the physical infrastructure, steel, power, data centers, I think AI is going to need so much of resources. So I think if someone's going back and looking at, again, more physical infrastructure investments to enable AI, I think that's a very exciting area. In the world of consumer, what excites me still is the world of conversational and social commerce. I think this area has not yet no one's been able to really crack this in India quite as yet. So whether there are any platform plays or certain kinds of applications in this area, this is an area that I am personally very intrigued by, particularly when you look at vernacular languages, but the whole world of conversational commerce to be able to really humanize the online buying experience. I think the online buying experience today is extremely boring, but there are huge opportunities to be able to really excite the imagination of people. But whoever can crack, how to make online experiences of shopping far more exciting, I think there are lots of opportunities there.
And finally, Vivek, for all the young folks watching this today, let's wrap this up with some advice for the younger folks. So say if you were to go back today and give some advice to your 25-year-old self, what would that be? And secondly, what is that one quality you think young professionals today need to really thrive in their careers?
I think when you're 25, everyone is very restless and feels like you are against the race of time. I wish I'd taken more risks when I was 25. The world today for a 25-year-old is full of so many opportunities. At the same time, it's very important to remember that careers don't necessarily need to follow a linear path. The key is to believe in oneself, to really enjoy the journey, keep on learning, and not follow anybody else's playbook, but actually create your own book, one page at a time. And while doing it, have a lot of fun.
All right, Vivek. So let's switch the gears a bit now for the rapid fire round. I just have some quick, short questions for you just to get to know what's running on the top of your head. So the first question, which is that one book that maybe changed the way you think about business?
The book I've always loved is It's the Goal by Ellie Goldratt.
What is the most memorable startup pitch that you have ever heard?
One of the best pitches was actually by Ahana Gautam, who is the founder of Open Secret. Ahana, came to me without a presentation, but just brought a few of her products. And they were actually the most delicious products. And so sometimes I think, when founders, rather than obviously PowerPoint slides are important, when founders speak from the heart with conviction and passion, those to me are some of the best pitches. So sometimes, showing is a much powerful way than telling. And those in some ways are some of the best pitches for me.
Wow, that's a great takeaway. So coming to the next one, which startup in India are you really excited about, other than Boat and Honasa, of course?
Three are very close to my heart. One, Meghna, you talked about Velocity. Velocity is now trying to crack the entire distribution in rural India. The second is Magic Pin, which is truly working on the online to offline commerce piece and almost creating performance marketing for the offline space through a very innovative platform. The third is a company called MStack, which is a global marketplace for specialty chemicals. Given what's been happening geopolitically, everyone's looking for a China plus one solution. And MStack is creating a branded full stack manufacturing platform to be able to actually sell specialty chemicals to consumers all around the world, starting with enterprises in the US.
Now, coming to the last one, Vivek, keeping it tricky. Let's say you weren't into business or investing today. What do you think you would be doing?
Oh, that's a difficult one, Meghna. I think I'd probably be a scriptwriter. A scriptwriter trying to find a way to, light up theater halls with cliffhangers that resonate with audiences.
That's a really interesting perspective. So this was one fun, Vivek. Thank you for keeping it so candid. And as we wrap up, I really just want to thank you for having such an inspiring, candid conversation. And we are really excited to know what you're on to next.
Thank you, Meghna. It was a delight and so much fun doing this with you.
Thank you.